Good evening. I've been asked to talk about thinning just for a very short time, and we're entering a period of time when I, I call it rescue thinning. I'm going to be talking about three different uh, timings or stages of thinning. Right now, we are, I would say, in the middle or at the end of what I call a sweet spot. The 7 to 14 or 18 to 14 millimeter stage where uh, fruit are most sensitive to chemical thinners. But we aren't too far away from the 15 to 18 millimeter stage when it becomes it becomes more difficult to thin, especially with the thinners that we normally use earlier. And in order to be successful at this period of time, you have to have a little bit of help from the weather. And then when fruit get to be about 18 to 25 millimeters, that's where I consider that you need to have rescue thinning, because with very few exceptions, and I really can't think of any, uh, you need to have another thinner, because our traditional thinners do not work during this period of time. So next slide. Okay, what is rescue thinning? um, Next. Okay, now um, our next stage that we will be moving into very shortly, as I indicate, is the 15 to 18 millimeter stage, and we can use our traditional thinners. I have I have listed three here in combinations. NAA is one that we've used quite liberally up to this point and has been very effective. However, I offer a bit of caution now, because when fruit get to be about 15 or 16 millimeters, they become sensitive to NAA, particularly with higher rates of NAA, which you probably will be required to use in hot temperatures. This may cause a reduction in fruit size, or even if you do get thinning, you won't have any increase in fruit size. So you have to be reasonably careful when you use NAA. Carbaryl, of course, everyone feels comfortable using carbaryl, but during this period of time, it just the thinning is just what I would call just a little, and probably not enough. If you need to have thinning done during this period of time, carbaryl just will not get it done. Maxell is the of the three is the one that I would suggest that you use, particularly at the 15 to 16 millimeter stage. It is, I think, I've had more success at this particular time, and the downside is that you have to use, you have to have warmer temperatures in order for this to work. Okay, now the last two thinners I have are combinations. NAA plus carbaryl, I think the combination is much better than both, but all the comments I made about each one uh, is, um, is applicable. And again, the combination that I really like is Maxell plus carbaryl during this particularly early time. It's effective, particularly when you have warmer temperatures. And uh, in order for Maxell to be effective, you really have to have carbaryl in there. Maxell is, as I mentioned earlier, is a rather weak thinner, and so you have to have carbaryl in to give it a good opportunity to thin. So those are what I would say the options you have. Next. Now we enter in the period that I call the Hail Mary, or the rescue thinning period, which is 18 to 25. With very few exceptions, and I really can't think of any, um, our traditional thinners are not effective during this period of time. We have to have something else. And epithan is probably the only reliable thinner to use during this period. Sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. And what I mean by this is sometimes it thins and sometimes it does not. uh, you, in order to be successful, you really need to have warmer temperatures, especially following the application. And I always like to add carbaryl with Ethifon. So it's been my experience that 300 parts per million or 1 pint per 100 gallons is a good rate to start with. I've had success with 400 parts per million, and I would not hesitate to use that. But I think many people might get nervous. So I think a good middle of the road suggestion is 300 parts per million. Next. There's always the possibility of not getting thinning, or there is occasionally a possibility of overthinning. I really have not seen the overthinning very much at all. So it's really not much of a concern to me. Your choice is have overset and have small fruit and poor fruit quality at the end, or take a chance and put on Ethifon. Now, I don't think I have to remind you that so far this season, you've taken chances every time you put on a thinner. So this is no different, and I would say it's not all that much more. It puts you in peril. Okay, now not all cultivars respond the same, unfortunately. Golden Delicious is one that is quite sensitive, and I know lower rates are suggested. Okay, now suggestions for specific varieties can be found in the UMass fact sheet F129R, and that was written by Wes Audi and Win Cowgill. You may want to check that out. Next, in my last slide, help is on the way. I've talked about this before, a seed. This is a new thinner that is being introduced by Valent. What it is a naturally occurring compound called ACC. It's an intermediate precursor to ethylene. So when you apply it, it will give off ethylene gas. The strong point of this thinner, and it really is an important point, it thins preferentially at the 18 to 20 millimeter stage. We have no thinner that really works well during this period of time, and this one works preferentially at that stage. And I think that it holds a great deal of promise. It will probably be available in 2 or 3 years, I suspect, according to Valent. So I think this is one you should be looking forward to, and I will have more to say about this. I know Jim Krupa will probably be applying treatments for me next Monday on my plot. So I think that's it, unless there's some questions later on.